Thank you.
Went to a great cause.
I went to a great cause. Do I get a percentage of this?
Video for a fundraiser for my show back home.
I was just gonna say, do I get a percentage of it? If it's a great.
I don't know, I'll talk to
when people say great cause, it means there's money involved. That's always. Should go with great success.
Great success. You should raise more than 2 cents.
Hi Josh, what are you doing over there?
Fundraising.
Just out there, huh? You're just out there.
Where I normally am.
All right, when I want to scream, I always turn to the right. Now I have to.
I know. Yeah.
Okay. Yesterday, Baruch Hashem, got a lot done in terms of understanding the inyan of Dei Mechzera and Asher Yechzera. 2 different levels of the need to give the one who's down on his luck that which he is lacking. And that might even bring someone to a state where he's been given things that are not what you and I would call necessary, but somehow subjectively for him they're necessary. And what was that in Ruchnias? A level of godly light that's absolutely necessary for the direct, as the direct source of existence of created reality. It's mamale. And that level of light that is part of the process. It's called Seviv Kol Almin. It's part of the world. It's connected to the world, but is, what we might call a tosefet, something additional, something that is not directly responsible for the existence of reality. And what was that in time? 6 days of creation and Shabbos. What Shabbos? The revelation of Seviv. Shabbos is the revelation of a higher level of godly light. Shabbos is when we come to a revelation of the true Ratzon, the true desire of the Creator in creation. Shabbos is a time of Tainuk, Oineg Shabbos, which is Makif, right? Which is a level beyond, just like Ratzon. Ratzon and Tainuk are the 2 powers of Seviv that we talked about in terms of the soul, right? 2 aspects of 2 powers of the soul that are Makif, they aren't clothed in our body, but express themselves equally in all of our reality. So you can experience intellectual, emotional, spiritual, physical pleasure. Right? Whereas you can't experience auditory sight. Sight is sight, and hearing is hearing, and never the twain shall meet. 2 completely different states of reality. So created reality until Shabbos is a time of contention, a time of differentiation. Shabbos, ba Menucha, the Chazal say, the Rebbe quoted that. Shabbos comes and Menucha comes. What's Menucha? Calm. What does that mean? A state of unity. What does the revelation of Seviv bring about? And this we've talked about before, and this is why Seviv is not revealed generally, right? Because what will Seviv bring about? If infinite reality were revealed, what would happen to finite realities? It would disappear, okay? And what you're saying is absolutely true. What's the word we use in Chassidus for that reality? Bittul. It ceases to exist. In a state of bittul, state of nullification. Okay, in order for created reality to exist, so then there has to be a certain concealment of, there has to be basically a complete concealment of infinite. And that's Mamale. Mamale is that level of light that expresses itself in finite reality. How? Through kelim, through vessels. Okay. Shabbos, Menucha comes in that state of bittul, when all there is Elokus. And that's Shabbos. Famous story of Chatshafagan. Chatshafagan was the secretary of the Frierdiker Rebbe, who was a very, very Chassidic shiur. As a matter of fact, at one point he was crying, and the Frierdiker Rebbe asked him why he was crying. He said, because taking care of all those things that I have to take care of for the Rebbe is keeping me away from learning Chassidus and doing it afraid, and it's very difficult. So the Rebbe said, okay, it's very good, that's where it goes. But he was a Chassidic shiur. Chatshafagan once spent Shabbos in a particular town full of Chassidim. And at the Farbrengen, after davening, so he talked about the fact that I'm sorry. There was that Shabbos, that Friday, that Shabbos. Of course, maybe the Shabbos before. I don't remember. But there had been a tremendous scandal in the town. What was the scandal? The scandal was that for the first time in the history of this little Jewish village, someone was Machal Shabbos in public. And it just scandalized everybody. And Chassidic was for bringing the next week. And he talked about Chil Shabbos. So they all thought he was talking about the guy who had his store open or whatever it happened to be. And after he talked about it for a while, he said, "You think I'm talking about the fact that there was someone with a store open. That's not what I'm talking about. What's real Chil Shabbos? That's not Chil Shabbos. That's just destroying Shabbos. But how do you make Shabbos into Chil?" So he said a heavy thing, but I'll throw this out to you. Right? So the person gets up in the morning and doesn't learn Chassidus for an hour before he davens. He said, that's Chil Shabbos. Because he's taking Shabbos, which is a time of unbelievable godly revelation, and he's not using it for the purpose that it was created. It was Chachif. Deal with that as you may. Right? There's some Chassidish Yidden out there. Right? Okay, so we saw these two levels. So Sevev is so to speak, I mean, it's a crazy thing to say about Sevev, but why not? It's like the katsefet, it's the icing on the cake. It's beautiful, incredible, amazing, but it's not, so to speak, absolutely necessary for the day-to-day, moment-by-moment existence of reality. So relative to the poor person, what's that? That's basic needs, that's mamale. And then sus lirkei v'lav, and eved larutz lefanav, the horse to ride on, and the eved, the servant to serve him, that's sevev. But then the Gemara says, "Ve'i ata metzuva la'ashrei." You're not commanded to make him an ashir. So that means the level of revelation of Sevev is not an ashir, right? Because he corresponds to the one who needs the eved and the sus. Okay, so but that Sevev relates to that level in Ruchnius. That's not Asher. It's amazing and incredible, but it's not Asher. All right, so what's Asher? Let's see, lacking nothing. What's that in Ruchnius? So we are I'm counting from the bottom of the page. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 lines up from the bottom of the page. Ve'inyan hashiras de Mesha hu. The matter of riches of Mesha is, we said, Tfilu la'asher, the 90th chapter of Tehillim, is Tfilah LaMesha, meaning it says Tfilah LaMesha, and Zohar calls that Tfilah Sa'asher. So Mesha is the Asher. That means Mesha is beyond the one who has the, in Gashmias, he's beyond the one who has the horse and the Eved. In Ruchnias, he's beyond the revelation of Sevev, infinite godly light. The Neisif al Zeh shiur be'Gilui Giluyim the Mamala v'Sevev. In addition to the fact that Mesha, that the levels of Mamali and Sevev, those two levels of godly light, shone and were revealed to Moshe. Meaning, when Moshe looked at physical reality, he saw it as an expression of godly creative energy. Heyer etzle begilui, what also shined by Moshe in a revealed way, gam hagilui, a third level, because he's the Usher, of or ein seif shalamayla mishaychis le'elamis. The level of infinite godly light that's beyond relevance to the worlds. Completely transcendent state of godly light. What do we usually call that, or often call that in Chassidus? I'll throw it out because you'll run into it in your travels through Chassidus for the rest of your life. You'll run into Or Shelifnei Tzimtzum, the light before any constriction. Or Ein Sof. Or Ein Sof is it's exactly what it sounds like. Or that's Ein Sof, that's completely beyond limitation. And to such an extent, we're going to see that limitation doesn't even relate to it. It's not that it's beyond limitation and that happens to be its situation right now, right? That's like the person who has enough money and isn't lacking any money right now, okay? But that's not an existential reality. That's just, they happen to be right now in a good place. Right? Okay.
Is that the same as Ein Sof or Livnei Tzimtzum?
What? Is what?
Or Livnei Tzimtzum, that's the same as Ein Sof?
Generally, yeah. Right. Absolutely infinite godly light that has no shaykhis whatsoever, no relevance whatsoever to worlds, completely transcendent of worlds, and no relevance whatsoever to the whole notion of lacking.
So,
It's not that it doesn't lack. The whole notion of lacking is not relevant to that state of reality in any way, shape, or form. Soivev, so we said there is something about Soivev that is on some level limited. That it's infinite and therefore it doesn't express itself in finite. So therefore in finite reality it's concealed. Okay, so then it's limited. That's why we describe it as Soivev Kol Almin. It's that which is makif, surrounds, encompasses the worlds. Again, it doesn't encompass. It's found here. We talked about that, right? It's here, but it's not revealed. Infinite reality is here. What's the example for the fact that infinite reality is here? No. 2 dots. Thank you. Thank you, Betsy. You saved me. I always feel good that when one person understands something that we said and remembers it, so then it's worth getting up in the morning. If no one ever remembers what we said yesterday, so that I wonder, like, well, okay, what am I doing exactly? Especially when I'm standing there, there's no bus. But the sign, instead of saying 2 minutes, says 12. Well, what happened to the 2-minute one? It's gone. Gone to the Arab holiday. So 2 points in space. How many points in space are there between 2 finite points in space? Infinite amount of points. How many numbers are there between the 2 finite numbers, 1 and 1.1? Infinite amount of numbers. Now, when you turn that number into a finite number, 1.01, it's still part of an infinite set of numbers, even though it's a finite number, but it's part of an infinite set of numbers. But what don't you see? We don't see the infinite of it. What do you see? You see the finite of it. You could theoretically, you can write 1.01 and you can also see it on a line. Here's 1, here's 2, so 1.01 is right over there on the line. Okay. Yeah?
you answered that.
How did I know that? I didn't know that.
What?
I wish I'd known that, then I could say I'm clairvoyant, but I'm not, so there you go.
Regarding Saiviv and unlimited light, what's the difference?
So Seivev's limited to the extent that it can't express itself in finite. Or the Ein Sof isn't limited in any way, shape, or form. Absolutely no limitation whatsoever. That's why it says about our Ein Sof, L'mayla l'mayad ein kates, l'mat l'matad ein tachlis. It's above, it's below. It's not limited. Right. Imagine it as basically synonymous with the Eibishter himself, as opposed to his revelation. Even though there's a whole discussion, I don't want to get into that discussion. The Rebbe's going to actually say it here that it's one and the same. There's a whole discussion as to whether that word Ein Sof refers to what you and I call Atzmus, the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or not. And that's a machlokes amongst Mekubalim. Right? And that discussion, you can ask Zechariah about that, and if he doesn't know, so tell his teacher. Right? Because that in the Maimarim that they're learning in Samach Vav, so at the beginning of the Hemshech that they're learning, they've been learning it all year. So the Rebbe Shab has a whole discussion about the different shitas in Kabbalah regarding what those words Ein Sof mean. Right? Especially, right? So generally we say Or Ein Sof. So does Or Ein Sof mean the essence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Does Or Ein Sof mean unlimited light? So light's not essence, right? The difference between light and essence light is revelation. Essence is just essential being. A mushal for that in Gashmias is the difference between sunlight and the sun. Sunlight is not the sun. It emanates from the sun. It's connected to the sun. It's inseparable from the sun. It's so powerfully connected to the sun that it's perfectly reasonable for you to say, boy, the sun's bright today. Boy, the sun's hot today. Now, in absolute terms, that's a really stupid thing to say, right? Because what do you mean the sun's hot today? The sun's hot when it's minus 42 degrees in Moscow. The sun's just as hot Right? Sunlight isn't doing a very good job heating me up. Right? It's very bright, right? Sunlight on a freezing cold winter day in Chicago, pretty bright light, not very good at warming the place up. Like, what's wrong? Why doesn't this light work? Okay. So you'll say, gee, the sun's bright today in December in Chicago. And it is. It'll be unbelievably bright. You'll have to wear sunglasses, even though it's minus 35 degrees Fahrenheit. Mm-hmm. I was once in Chicago. It was minus 16. There were 1 million people outside on the street in Chicago because it was a Monday morning and the day before the Chicago Bears won the Super Bowl. There were 1 million people outside in minus 16 degrees Fahrenheit, many of them without shirts on with a big C on their chest, celebrating. I said, wow, this is like wild. I couldn't believe it. I was staying in a house where the person had a television. And I landed that day in Chicago, and I had left the morning before. I was in Chicago for Shabbos. I left the morning before 9 a.m. The airport was absolutely full of drunk Chicagoans waiting to get on planes to New Orleans. Packed. They were all absolutely shicker at 9 in the morning. Right?
Yep, that's the Midwest.
Chicago. And then, so the next day I flew back. And it was minus 16 degrees, and they were celebrating. It was really bizarre. I went to the house, and in the kitchen there was this little tiny television. They used it to watch the news. So what are you watching? Oh, look, there's a parade, not a parade, whatever it was. And it's minus 16 degrees out there. 1 million people. See, if you really want it, you can do anything.
Yeah, alcohol warms you up.
Right. Well, it makes you not aware of the fact that you're actually going to freeze because it brings the blood to your surface, which is why you get red, which means you're going to get colder faster and die of hypothermia. But you won't feel it, so there's an advantage to that. But it doesn't really warm you up, it makes you colder. Right?
Cinnamon is drinking on the way to warm
I say that, I don't know, but it feels warm inside. What it does tell you, why do people when they're drunk look red? Because it pushes your blood to the surface, because your blood needs whatever's out there, I don't know. So, anyway, don't drink. Say l'chaim now and then, but don't drink. Okay, so what about Meisha? I'm sorry, skip the line. End of the brackets. Heir etzle begilui, what also was revealed to him, a gilui d'orenzav shalamayla mishaychis leilamis, ukemavur ba'maimer, as it's explained in the Maimer. Then that means the Rebbe Shab's Maimer, which the Rebbe had started talking about, Ois Daled. The Maimer called Tefillah L'Meisha. The Meisha Nikra Osher, Meisha is called an Osher, Hu Lefi Shemeisha Bechinas Das Elyon. Because Meisha is the level of Das Elyon. Upper level of Das, right? Everybody's learned Tanya, I hope, right? 3rd chapter of Tanya, Chochma Bina Das. What's Chokhmah? The power of intellect. What's Bina? Expressing that power, realizing the potential in, actualizing the potential in Chokhmah to come to a state of Bina, Ani Mevin. I understand. Why can I understand? Well, because I have this power called Chokhmah that allows me to understand things. Okay. But that's all intellect. I want to bring that down into my emotional state, and I want to therefore have a connection to that which I have now come to an intellectual understanding of in terms of its greatness and beauty and how amazing it is. Okay, so that's called Das. Das is the internalization of the intellect so that it affects your emotion, which is a whole world unto itself. Okay, fine. I mean, it's the bridge between, it's a power of intellect, but it's the power of intellect that is the bridge from intellect to emotion. That's called Das Tachten. That Das that's described in Tanya is Das Tachten, lower level of Das. What does that do? Connect intellect to emotion. What is Das Elyon? Das Elyon is a higher level. We're going to use technical terms in a minute that some of you know, some of you don't know. That's okay. Fine. Das Elyon is the power in Keser that allows for the synthesis of Chokhmah and Bina. Not intellect to emotion, but the synthesis of the two powers of intellect, called Chokhmah and Bina. So that's the technical reality called Das Elyon. Okay, what's the source of Das Tachton? A place in Keser, right? Keser is Makif, Ratzon is a power of Keser, Tainug is a power of Keser, right? We've talked about that. Keser is that sphera that is the source of the world, but not part of the world. All right? So what's the source? The first place in any particular world of the 10 spheres is Chokhmah. Okay? Just like Chokhmah is the beginning of your conscious reality. It's the source of your conscious reality. Even though it's interesting because it's the source of your conscious reality, but there's no place, there's no ani in Chokhmah yet. You can conjugate any verb any way in Lashon HaKodesh. But in Chokhmah, there's no ani in a simple form. Ani chokem, I am wising. You can't wise, right? You can have wisdom, but you can't wise. What can you do? You can understand. Bina is the beginning of where you and I are aware of our own conscious reality. That's why Bina can be conjugated ani mevin. I understand. There's an I in Bina. Chokhmah is still a state of bittul. There's no I yet. But it's the source of the ability to be conscious of I. Intellect, naked intellect. How does it work? I have no clue. How does it work that when you look at something you can read it and figure it out? I don't know. I have no idea why, but it just works. Okay? Fine. So a human has this thing called Chokhmah. That Chokhmah can lead to a state called Bina. Bina, in terms of experience, is the beginning of human consciousness. It's where human consciousness comes into a state of revelation. But the source of that is Chokhmah. So that's still part of conscious you. Still part of the world of conscious you. There's something beyond conscious you. In spheres, what's that? That's Keter. In you, what's that called? Well, that's what I'm talking about. Ratzon, Tainu, superconscious levels of you. Right? Why are they superconscious? Well, you don't have conscious control over them, do you? Do you have conscious control over what you want? No. Do you have conscious control over not thinking about what you want? Yes. Because that's conscious you. You want to think about it? Stop thinking about it. That might be hard, but I can do that. Think about something else. Start singing a niggin. I don't know. Make a phone call. Take your mind off it. Can I stop wanting it? I can't stop wanting it. I want it. I don't know how to do that. Over time, can I change my wants? Absolutely. The cigarette smoker can be a non-cigarette smoker 5 years later. Right? 100%. A lot of hard work. But he changed his ruts and he no longer wants a cigarette. He finds the smell as disgusting as all the rest of us after 5 years. Someone walks by just having smoked a cigarette, it's like an ashtray just walked by you. Oh, they don't understand how much they smell. I mean, it's just a ridiculous thing to do. Okay, I'm saying that most people start when they're young and stupid. And then they don't get around to quitting. Right? Unfortunately, usually God makes them quit at some point. But they stop breathing at the same time. So I'm just throwing this out in case you know someone that you like that does this and you can try to convince them not to. Right? And I once said this in class, and I will continue saying it because of the time I said it. And a year later, Ben, not Ben Brody, who some of you might know, but a different Ben who was here probably 10 years ago. Ben came up to me and said, Rabbi, I just want you to know that I've stopped smoking for a year already. It's 1 year. I said, what do you mean? He said, yeah, when you made that tirade in class about smoking, I decided I'm going to stop, and I haven't started. And to this day, he doesn't smoke. Right? So it's worth it. My wife used to work on an intensive care ambulance, and she was just beginning her medical career, so to speak. So she works, it used to be that since doctors were paid so poorly in this country, now they're paid a little better. In those days, doctors were paid so poorly, they could actually afford to put a doctor on an intensive care ambulance instead of a fancy paramedic. So doctors, if God forbid someone had a heart attack or a pulmonary edema, so a doctor would show up. not just paramedics. And doctors, I mean, I know paramedics will say this is not true, but doctors do know more than paramedics. Right? So I heard a physician's assistant was sitting, the Lubavitch guy was sitting in a Fabrengen, and someone asked him, what's the difference between a physician's assistant and a doctor? A physician's assistant did not go to medical school. He learned for 2 years to become a physician. Medical school, they went for 5 or 6 and then did a specialty. So what was his answer? And this is really amazing. His answer was, well, the only difference is doctors have a lot of gaiva and we don't. Whoa, if that's not gaiva, I've never heard anything. Okay, but say that gaiva is pride. Okay, so that's not true. So anyway, my wife was on the ambulance, and unfortunately, we got a lot of pulmonary edemas. Right? What's that? That's someone who's frothing at the mouth because there's so much water in the lungs. She said never, not once, did she see someone under 55 on the ground experiencing that who was not a cigarette smoker. Not once. She worked probably 15 years on the ambulance. Right? And what she used to do, of course, what used to happen, the father would be on the floor, and his sons would be hovering around, wondering how he is, and what are they doing while they're hovering around? So she's not timid, my wife. She would look from him up to them and say, if you keep that up, you'll be him in 25 years. Get out of here with those cigarettes. Not once was there a guy under 55 who was on the floor, couldn't breathe because his heart wasn't pumping enough blood and his lungs were full of froth and he was frothing at the mouth. They bring them back. I mean, you can usually get someone back from pulmonary edema. But they're going to quit smoking or it's going to happen again. Right? So don't smoke cigarettes. It's a really stupid thing to do. You probably want to be at your grandchildren's weddings, right? Children, no problem. Grandchildren. Once you meet your grandchildren, you'll want to be at their weddings. Okay. Das Elliot. What's this? So we talked about why? How do we get there? We got the superconscious reality, Ratzon, and Tainuk. What gives me pleasure? I don't know. Everybody here like corn? Like eating corn? Like eating peas? Less people say. You like peas? Everybody likes peas?
Peas are better.
You like peas more than corn?
No.
No, like corn more than peas. Why does eating corn give you more pleasure than eating peas? I have no
It
idea.
has more sugar.
It's weird.
Okay, could be. I mean, why do you get more pleasure from sugar than from a sweet taste as opposed to a not sweet taste?
Affects your brain.
Why does it affect your brain?
Because the sugar hits your bloodstream faster.
Okay, but say there. Right? Okay, fine. Great, good job. Right? You know what? There's all sorts of people who get a lot more pleasure, and at a certain age, this generally seems to be the case, right? Personally, if you gave me a piece of nice sweet milk chocolate, or a piece of 85% Smirlings, I'd take the 85%. Why does that give me more pleasure? I don't know. According to you, it shouldn't, because I'm not getting the sugar rush. I don't know. And you will have children, and you will serve your children peas and carrots and corn, and one of them will take all the carrots and throw them off his the little tray in front of him on his high chair. When you're not looking, all the carrots are disappearing, right? And he'll eat the corn and the peas. And his big brother, or his twin, will take the peas and he'll throw them off the thing, and he'll eat the carrots and the corn. Why? Some deep place in this kid called Tainuk isn't triggered by that corn, or that pea, or those peas, or those carrots, or whatever it happens to be. Some kids will love it. There's things that the sugar definitely kids love, right? I mean, the first time we give a kid chocolate pudding, so they just don't know what happened to them. Their eyes open up and they start drooling all over themselves. And make sure there's a very thick bib. Right? Or to your ruined clothes. Okay, so there's certain things that obviously everybody gets pleasure from. But there are people who actually like vanilla ice cream more than chocolate ice cream. I don't know whether they should be allowed to vote, those people, but okay, but say them. There are people who like vanilla ice cream more than chocolate. Why? Because vanilla ice cream gives them more pleasure than chocolate ice cream. Why? I don't know. They're just like that. It's just what they like, right? Okay. Some people, I mean, when I was growing up, I mean, they actually gave us this stuff. I don't know, I mean, Baruch Hashem, we didn't give our kids this stuff. But growing up, there was less understanding of all this. So there was strawberry Quick and chocolate Nestle's Quick. I think there was banana Nestle's Quick. Okay, so what did most people like? Chocolate, right? Most people like chocolate. Some people like the strawberry Quick more than the chocolate. Why? For some reason, that gave them more pleasure. Sugar, they all had the same sugar. The chocolate pudding in the dining hall and the flavored yogurt in the dining hall both have exactly the same sugar content. 2.5 teaspoons of sugar in that little thing that sits on, right? Also the yogurt, which is theoretically healthy, right? The peach, strawberry yogurt, 2.5 teaspoons. Now, you might take the yogurt sometimes so you won't feel like such a lowlife eating chocolate pudding every day. But most people probably get more pleasure from the chocolate pudding than they get from the strawberry yogurt or the peach yogurt. Most, not all, but most. Sugar, it's not about sugar, because they both have exactly the same amount of sugar. Something called tainug. I don't know. Some people get pleasure from this, some people get, and where's that happen? That's a superconscious state of you and I. And as a matter of fact, it's a superconscious state of you and I that's very difficult to touch and is actually the source of our ratzon. Why do I want chocolate pudding? It gives me pleasure. Why does it give me pleasure? I don't know. So you'll tell me it's the sugar beseder, but honestly, you know, I mean, I was eating one of those puddings and not the pudding, the yogurts, and I looked at it, I said, you know, if I'm going to eat 2.5 teaspoons of sugar, I might as well have chocolate pudding. Why am I wasting my time having peach yogurt? So I stopped both, but no, I just figured how much can be in yogurt. I looked, I was shocked, 2.5 teaspoons in that little thing. I mean, there's barely room for anything else. It's a tiny little thing. Okay. It's like kids when they make a cup of tea and put 16 spoons of sugar in it and stir it up, right? Okay. So that's tainug. Tainug is coming from a place so deep in you and I. So in Elokus, what's that? That's a place in the Kadosh Baruch Hu called Atik. Atik Yomin, which is panemius of Keser, the inner state of Keser. It's completely transcendent of the physical world. Completely and totally. The external expression of Keser is called Arich Anpin. Just so when someone walks in, they'll think that we're moving names and they'll start asking Kalman to explain, yeah, Hashem exists and nothing but Him exists. What's it? Oh, what's it? Why don't you guys write that? Here. Atik. It's called Atik Yemim. I'm not writing that. Panemius Keser. Okay? The inner reality of Keser. Panemius, inner. Arich. Lower level of Keser. I don't want to say Chitzenius. Lower level of Keser. What's that? So we say Chitzenius. What's the difference between Panemius and Chitzenius? You say this talk all the time about Panemius and Chitzenius?
Is lower like external level of Keser?
External, Chitzenius. External and inner reality. What's the difference between them? The many, many ways of explaining the difference. What's the simple, most basic way, which is a good way to understand at first? Panemius is what something is. It's its being. Chitzenius is what it does. It's its function. Because Chitzenius is about what's happening outside of the thing. Chitzoni, external. Panemius is what's happening inside the thing. What is it? In our lives, we want to be into Panemius, not Chitzonius. We want to be into being and not function. If you're into being and not function, I'm sorry for being so harsh about this, but I'm just going to bring the ultimate example of it. If you're into being, if you believe in being, and you don't just believe in external function, then you will not murder an infant in its mother's stomach when it's a month old. Because that baby has as much being as the doctor murdering it. There's no difference in being. Huge difference in function. No comparison. So if you only believe in function, it's just a piece of flesh. It's a piece of flesh. Now, that does not mean we are not Catholics when it comes to abortion, okay? There are many, many times when halacha will allow for abortion, okay? So the anti-abortionists don't express our position either. Okay, Beseder. That being said, that's a separate issue. But stum, abortion because it's inconvenient? No. Harming the mother? Yes. Psychologically and emotionally? Yeah, most Rabbanim will say, okay, this is going to cause emotional and psychological harm. It's just inconvenient. No, that's not a good reason to kill someone. What's the next step? Which is all over Europe and Canada, less in America, Baruch Hashem, because America is still much more godly than Europe and Canada. Offing old people. Why do you off old people?
They're expensive.
Yeah, they're expensive and they serve no function.
They're a strain on society.
Right? Serve no function. 4% of deaths in Canada are medically assisted. That's pretty heavy. Right? Meaning, you will be told by the social worker, maybe you want to consider MAID, medical assistance in death. It sounds good, MAID, right? M-A-I-D sounds, like sort of innocuous. We'll off you. Now, that's very useful for Canada, right? Socialist medical system. You are a strain on the society's budget. So let's get rid of as many old people as we can. It sounds horrible. That's what's going on, right?
Yeah.
England, same. Much of Europe. Because once you lose it, you lose it. Right? As soon as you have no appreciation of panemius, which is being, so it's about function, okay? So Beseder. I mean, what do you do with an old car? You give it a party and cry, you trade it in and get a new car. What's the big deal? Well, okay, why? Because what's a car? A car is about function. A car has no being. Doesn't mean it doesn't exist. Of course it exists, but it has no being per se. It's just a functionary. It gets you from place A to B. You're going to put all of your emotional energy into it? No, don't do that. Put your emotional energy into your relationship with God and your relationship with other people. That's where your emotional energy should be expended. Not on your couch, drapes, carpet, and cars. Because they have no being. That doesn't mean they're not nice and useful and helpful, but that's exactly what they are, nice, useful, and helpful. Okay. So what's arich? Arich is the function of Keser. Doesn't mean function's bad, function's wonderful. But there's always a deeper level. The function, what does Keser do? Keser is the source of Chokhmah, which is the beginning of world. Whatever world you're talking about. So Keser of Atzilus gives birth to Chokhmah of Atzilus, and that's where Eilam Atzilus begins. Okay. What's Atik? Panemius of Keser. What Keser is. What is Keser? Transcendent. So Sevev Kalalmim is something akin to Arich. It's a transcendent level, but it's connected to the level of immanent reality, Mamale. Or Ein Sof, Atik, Das Elyon, Pnimius Keser. So what was Keser? Keser will bring about the synthesis of two things that are seemingly opposite. So the lower expression of Keser, Das Tachton, is connecting intellect to emotion. That's the Das that's talked about in Tanya. In Igeres HaKodesh, Ches, Nikmeli, Ches. So the Rebbe talks about Das Elyon, the Alter Rebbe in Tanya. But in Tanya itself, the Rebbe talks about Das in Tanya, Chochmah Bina Das, he's talking about Das Tachton, the connection of intellect to emotion. Still, it's godly reality. The fact that it says lower level doesn't mean it's something that we wouldn't impressed by and appreciate. But there's a higher level called Das Elyon. That's Mesha. Mesha's on the level of Das Elyon. Atik, completely transcendent godly reality, where there's no limitation whatsoever. Limitation is not relevant. Ukamavur b'maimer, as it says in the Maimer. Dezeh shemesha nikra osher, that which Mesha is called osher, ulefisha Mesha bechinas das elyon. It's this level of das elyon. Umihamayla shiva das elyon. One of the advantages of das elyon al das tachton relative to das tachton. The das tachton mekabel michitzonius akeser. That's what I'm saying. What we just said. Das tachton receives its vitality from chitzonius akeser, the external expression of keser, called arech. Soivev, v'das elyon mekabel mipnimius akeser, and das elyon receives its vitality from pnimius akeser, atik, and what's that? Orein seif shelamayla migeder elamis, the infinite light that's beyond worlds, can't be defined in terms of worlds. Soivev is a level of infinite reality, but a level of infinite reality that's all about being dancing with finite reality, though it's not revealed there because it's infinite. Then there's a level beyond that. It's not relevant to finite in any way, shape, or form. It's also not really relevant to infinite. It's beyond both. So it's not limited by either. So let's finish up. Oh no, we have a little more time. We'll be able to go. We'll see the next question. Okay. Based on what we just said, we have to understand. We just described Mesha as the usher, and we just described what that ashiris means. In Gashmias, that ashiris means someone who is be'etzim ashir. Right? It's not that he's not lacking anything. He's mushba miribui hashefa. Right? That's the language the Rebbe used at the top of the page. Tremendous bounty. And our mashal was the King of England as opposed to Jeff Bezos. Jeff Bezos is rich. Why? Because you give him a lot of money because you buy at Amazon. Right? The King of England is rich because he's the King of England. It's just that simple. He just is who he is, so he's rich. Right? Okay. So neither of them are rich, actually. They're both Sus Lichayv Halavan Eved Larutz Lefanav. They have a lot of money. Okay. There's a level beyond them where there's no notion of lacking whatsoever. And in Ruchnius, but you know, on some level, at least in Gashmias, you would call the King of England rich, right? Okay, so even the person who's down on his luck, you don't have to give him what the King of England has. And you can't give him what the King of England has. Because if you're giving him, then he's not the King of England. Because the King of England isn't rich because you're giving him. The King of England is rich because he's the King of England. Okay, so it's just something beyond your ability to give. Okay, so now in Ruchnius, what's that? So Moshe Rabbeinu is Tefillas Osher. Moshe Rabbeinu is privy to a level of godly reality that's beyond any limitation whatsoever. So then what question arises? What's he davening for? Isn't davening all about asking for that which is lacking? So what is he davening for? Tefillah Lamesha. Don't answer the question, appreciate the question. Huh?
Isn't davening also about praising Hashem?
Yeah, but davening ultimately, what do you do in Shemona Esrei? What's it ultimately about? What are you spending 13 brachas doing? Asking. What do you do first? First you praise him. Then you ask, then you thank. But the ikar is the stuff in the middle. Not on Shabbos. Because Shabbos is Sevev. Okay. So yes, there's definitely an aspect of davening that's praise, but ultimately davening is asking for that which is lacking. And according to the Ramban, the mitzvah of tefillah is all about asking that which is lacking. There is no mitzvah of tefillah to daven once a day, twice a day, or 3 times a day, according to the Ramban. The only time there's a mitzvah of tefillah is to daven when you're in a time of trouble. The Rambam holds that no, there's a mitzvah of tefillah to daven once a day, to serve God through prayer. Okay. According to Ramban, the mitzvah of tefillah, the Torah commandment to daven is only when you're lacking. So what's tefillah l'maisha? Valpizeh, based on what we just learned. Now we understand it more fully, less fully, more in a more detailed way or in a less detailed way. We understand that Moshe Rabbeinu is on a level that's beyond anything we can imagine. And it's on a level beyond lacking. So therefore, Alpizeh, Tzarech lahavin oid yoser inyan the tefillah l'meisha. You have to understand this idea of tefillah l'meisha. Tefillah is osher, the tefillah of the osher. So we said in halacha, tefillah l'osher. A shofar-driven Lexus is not an usher. That's just, good luck. It's not an usher. Because you don't have to take someone to take someone into a state of shiur. We learned it all from the halacha. We learned it all from Nigla. Tefillah is usher. Hare inyan a tefillah hu shekadosh baruch hu yamales machzorei. The basic inyan of tefillah is you're asking HaKadosh Baruch Hu to fill that which is lacking. For cave and Shemesha Haya Osher, and since Moshe was an Osher, it's just since Moshe Haya Osher, Hein Begashmis, Hein Baruch is both in material goods and spiritual reality. Not only did he not lack in actuality anything, but this is the third level that we were just talking about. It wasn't relevant to him, the whole notion of lacking. It's not that he happens to be in a situation where he doesn't lack. The notion of chisaron and Moshe are contradictory. So what's Moshe davening for? So what's his tefillah? That's our question. Amazing question. So maybe the answer is he's praising God. I don't know, we'll see. Let's go a little further, because we have 2 more minutes. We'll see the beginning of the answer. But the Rebbe asks an incredibly powerful question on this. We'll have class again tomorrow. I think probably this week review will be Thursday. Okay? Not because I like that, because there's also review in Gemara on Thursday. But I might be for bringing in Sfas Wednesday night, so it'll just be a reasonable morning to do a review. Unakudas abir b'zeh ba'maimer. Again, Rebbe Shab's Maimer, Tafresh Samach, year 1900. The tefillas osher he loy bishvil atzmei, ela bishvil knesses Israel. The tefillah of the osher is not for himself; it's for the Jewish people. It's a medrash. It's a nice thing to say, but if you can't back it up with objective truth, so then it might just be a nice thing to say, but it's true. And what's refreshing about Torah is we're not interested in nice things to say, we're interested in truth. So if you can't back it up with Chazal, Lavdafka, it's true. Great idea, but it might just not be true. It is important, it's not for now the discussion, but it is important to understand that there's a difference between brilliant and true. There are many, many, many brilliant ideas. They're brilliant, but they're not true. We're not interested in brilliance, we're interested in truth. Science is littered with unbelievably brilliant ideas that have been shown to not be true. Doesn't mean they're not brilliant, unbelievable, creative, incredible ideas. It's not true. The Gemara is full of brilliant ideas that aren't true. Every single time the Gemara says, Pshita, no, Mao Detema, what might you have said? Who's going to say this? A stupid person? Stupid people rarely say anything of interest. This is something really that someone really thinking about things would say. Someone who knows everything but one line in a Mishnah. He's learned the whole Torah, but this one line in the Mishnah. And the Gemara asks on that line, Pshita, I understand, that's obvious. Why does the Mishnah have to tell me? Oh, what might I have thought? If I'm brilliant, what? Because you and I didn't come up with that when we learned the Mishnah. We weren't bothered by this. The Gemara says, Mao Detema, what might you have thought? Kamash Malon comes to tell you that's not true. It's brilliant. Amazing Havamina. Just not true. How do you know? Because that line in the Mishnah says it isn't. That's the whole reason that line in the Mishnah is there, so that brilliant people won't make this mistake. It happens all the time in the Gemara, right? Okay. So, if you want to say something, quote Chazal, quote the Rebbeim, quote the Baal Shem Tov, quote someone who knows what's going on. So let's just see the Medrash and then we'll stop. The Rebbe's going to explain the whole Medrash, but I want you to see it so that when we see it again tomorrow, it will be won't be brand new. Kedisa by Medrash, amazing Medrash. Al pasuk tefillah l'meisha, on the pasuk tefillah l'meisha. Now we said there's 3 types of tefillah. There's tefillah l'ani, that's David, tefillah l'Chabakuk, and tefillah l'meisha, which is the Ashir. Alapasik tefillah l'meisha, mashal l'ma davar doima. To what is this similar? L'shleisha shabal lito, etc., etc. 3 people came to the king to ask something from the king. Me'esa melech. They asked for tshuva. They asked for physical sustenance. They were lacking things, and they asked for those things, the other 2. Ba shlishi, the 3rd one comes. Amar lo melech, ma ta mavakesh. What do you request? Amar lo, he says, Eini mavakesh al atzmi davar. I don't ask for myself anything. Ella. Now the Rebbe is going to be medayik in every single word here in the next 2 pages. Ella, Medina Pleilis, Hi Chareva. There is a country, a city. Medina is a city, now it's country. But in those days it was city. There's a city, Pleinis, that's like John Doe. Right? There's a particular city, Hi Chareva, it's destroyed. V'hi Shelcha, and it's yours. Gezor Shetibane, decree that it should be rebuilt. That's what the 3rd one asks the king. Kach Mesha, so too Mesha. This is the Medrash. Loi bikesh la'atzmei ela bishvil Yisrael. He only asked for the Jewish people. Now, I just want you to see the Rebbe's question because it's so amazing, and then we'll start. We'll go over it again tomorrow. The Rebbe asked an unbelievable question. Bir zet tzarech lebir noisef. This explanation requires more explanation. Why? The lefi hanal, based on what we just said. So Mesha is the usher, so he doesn't have to ask for himself. So he's asking for someone else. Hatfila sha'usher mispala, the fact that the usher is davening bishvil acherim for other people, this isn't relevant to him being an usher. Anybody can daven for someone else. You have to be an usher to daven for someone else. I understand, you might say, oh no, the usher doesn't have anything to daven for, so he davens for... No. You could be a person who cares about someone else. I mean, no one in this room says Tehillim for anybody else. We're all saying Tehillim for someone who's sick, or we might not even know. So why do you have to be an usher for that? It's an amazing question. There must be some... This is the description of Chazal of Tfilas Usher, so there must be some expression of the Yeshirus in that which he's asking. Not, causative. Well, he doesn't have anything to say. I mean, the king asked him, and he's not lacking, so he made something up. No. Must be something intrinsic in being the usher such that this is what he'd ask for. But simple pshat, it's a connection. Anybody could ask for someone else. You don't have to be an usher. Amazing question. Right? That which he's davening for someone else, he wants that which is good for them. Upedish tfilas osher, but pashtus, simple pshat, hu shatfila shaloi, his tfila mipnei shu osher. It's because he's an osher. This is what he's asking for. So how does this medrash explain tfilas osher? He's asking for someone else because he cares for them. Anybody can do that. Is it nice? That's very nice. It's amazing. But why usher? Okay. See that tomorrow.